The valet took my slightly too sensible sedan with a practiced, polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Not the same deferential grin he gave the gleaming luxury SUVs lined up outside the towering, glass and steel structure of the Sterling Properties headquarters. Tonight, the air shimmered not just with the city lights reflecting off the building, but with the forced effervescence of a corporate anniversary gala. 30 years. 3 decades built on ambition, deals, and, in my experience, a carefully curated narrative of success that conveniently left out certain chapters, certain people. I smoothed down the skirt of my dress, professional, elegant, but certainly not the headline-grabbing designer gowns that would dominate the room tonight. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't my world anymore. Not really. Not since I walked away 5 years ago, or perhaps not since I was subtly, systematically pushed out. Sterling Properties was in my blood, or so I thought. Growing up, I'd trail my father around construction sites, listening to him talk about turning blueprints into tangible spaces. My first internship was in their mailroom. I worked my way up, skipped college summers to learn the business from the ground up, brought in my first major client by the time I was 23. I genuinely loved it, the negotiation, the design, the sheer puzzle of development. I thought it was my future, my legacy to build upon my father's. Then Victoria arrived. She married my father 10 years ago, all polished charm and steel-trap ambition hidden behind a warm smile. Quickly, she didn't just become his wife. She became a force within Sterling. Her son, Julian, followed soon after, fresh out of business school, brimming with inherited confidence and a complete lack of practical experience. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, things shifted. My ideas were met with polite skepticism, only to reappear later, slightly altered, credited to Julian and the new team direction. My projects were given away for Julian to gain leadership experience. Meetings I'd always attended suddenly happened when I happened to be unavailable. It wasn't overt. It was insidious, a slow erosion of my place until there was nothing left but a space where I used to be. Julian wasn't overtly malicious, not like Victoria. He was worse, casually entitled, genuinely believing his ideas were groundbreaking even when they were clearly mine or someone else's repurposed. He was the golden boy, untouchable because Victoria protected him fiercely. I saw the fear in her eyes sometimes, the desperate need for Julian to succeed, perhaps to validate her own choices or secure her position. That fear made her ruthless. I left quietly, heartbroken and exhausted from fighting an invisible enemy. I started my own small firm, Sterling Creek Development. Took out a scary loan, worked 18-hour days, chased every lead, learned every lesson the hard way. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly mine. The thing heavy in my clutch tonight wasn't a gift box. It was a bound proposal for the West Ridge Revitalization Project. Years in the making, navigating complex zoning laws, securing tricky financing, engaging with the community. It was my masterpiece, the kind of challenging, impactful development Sterling Properties should be doing, but had strayed from under Julian's direction. It was incredibly lucrative, a project that would put my small firm firmly on the map. And I was here tonight, proposal in hand, because of a flicker of something I couldn't quite extinguish. A foolish, lingering hope that if I brought them something this significant, something they needed, they would finally see me. See my talent, my resilience, the legacy I could contribute. A final, desperate attempt at reconciliation, at being seen as part of the family, part of the company's story. Victoria greeted me near the entrance, her smile brittle. "Riley, dear. You made it." Her eyes scanned my dress, my shoes. Running a small operation must keep one rather busy, doesn't it? So demanding. It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal. Julian sauntered over, clapped me too hard on the shoulder. "Riley, good to see you. Still doing quaint little houses." He chuckled. "Must be nice, less stress than the big leagues." I just smiled tightly. "Someone has to build them, Julian. And profitably, too." His smile faltered for a second before snapping back into place. Father was standing slightly behind Victoria, looking tired. He met my eyes for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something, regret? Pity? Before Victoria smoothly turned him to introduce him to someone important. He didn't object. He never did anymore. I mingled, enduring polite but distant conversations with people who clearly knew the score. "Oh, you're Riley Sterling? Julian's sister, isn't it?" Victoria had legally changed their last names when they married. The narrative was set. I was an adjunct, a footnote, related by marriage but separate from the real Sterling legacy Julian was building. Then I saw Arthur and Eleanor across the room. Arthur was my mentor at Sterling, the VP of planning who took me under his wing, saw my potential, and quietly raged against the way Victoria was sidelining me. Eleanor, his wife, had always offered quiet kindness and support. They left Sterling a year after me, starting their own small investment firm, built on integrity and quiet success. Seeing them felt like finding fresh air in a suffocating room. They were my anchors tonight. As dinner was announced, I clutched my bag, the proposal inside feeling like a physical weight, a heavy burden of years of trying to be enough. The knot in my stomach tightened. This was it. My last chance to prove I belonged. Dinner was a blur of polite conversation at a table far from the main stage. I watched the head table, Victoria radiating control, Julian playing the charismatic leader, Father a silent prop beside them. Snippets of conversations around me reinforced the narrative. Julian's genius, Victoria's strategic brilliance, the company's unprecedented growth, ignoring the fact that their recent projects were bland, safe, and less profitable than before, based on my contacts in the industry. Then came the speeches. Father spoke first, a short, prepared statement that felt lifeless. Victoria followed, recounting Sterling's history with careful omissions, emphasizing the new era and the visionary leadership that would guide the next 30 years. It was all preamble. Julian rose for the final toast. The spotlight seemed to find him naturally. He was good at this part, charming the crowd. He thanked the employees, the clients, the board. He built the suspense, talking about the company's bright future, his plans, his ambition. He turned to his mother, his voice thick with feigned emotion. "And of course," he said, raising his glass, looking directly at Victoria, who beamed back, "I owe everything to my incredible mother, Victoria, whose guidance, vision, and difficult, but necessary strategic decisions have cleared the path and ensured Sterling Properties is ready for its sole, dedicated future leader." The word soul landed like a physical blow. He didn't say son. He didn't need to. The implication hung heavy in the air. He was the one and only. There was no room for anyone else. No acknowledgement of my father's founding. No nod to anyone who had contributed along the way. It was a public coronation, a complete and utter erasure of my existence within the company I had once poured my heart into, within the family name they had now fully claimed. Victoria clapped, a sharp, triumphant sound. Father smiled, a practiced, empty expression that showed he either didn't grasp the cruelty or chose to ignore it. The room, following their lead, erupted in applause. No one looked at me. No one paused. No one questioned. The invisibility I had felt earlier solidified into a crushing weight. Memories flashed behind my eyes. 7-year-old me, showing my father a drawing of a building I designed, only for Victoria to redirect his attention to Julian's perfect report card. 15-year-old me, spending a summer helping draft proposals, overhearing Victoria tell father that Julian needed to be the one getting credit for everything if he was going to take over. The day I pitched West Ridge internally, full of passion, only for Julian to dismiss it as too complicated and not standard Sterling. The pain was a sharp, twisting knife. Years of trying, years of hoping, years of justifying their behavior, telling myself maybe they just didn't know how much they were hurting me. But Julian's word, Victoria's triumphant smile, father's complicit silence, it was all laid bare. They knew. They just didn't care. The hope I'd carried, heavy in my bag, shriveled and died. But in its place, something cold and hard began to form. A fierce, protective instinct. Not for them, but for myself. For the life I had built. For the project I had created. Julian wanted to be the sole leader? Fine. He could have the shell of a company they were hollowing out. I would take the future I had earned. Looking across the room, I saw Arthur and Eleanor. Their faces were etched with concern. They saw the slight. They saw me. They were my real family in this room of strangers claiming kinship. The decision solidified in my gut, cold and certain. The proposal felt different now. Not a peace offering. A weapon. I stood up. My chair scraped softly on the floor. No heads turned. I was still the invisible one, the ghost at the feast. But this time, the invisibility felt like power. I walked, not towards the exit, but across the room, towards Arthur and Eleanor's table. Each step was deliberate, a quiet defiance. The polite murmur of conversation continued around me, oblivious. I reached their table and placed the heavy, bound proposal document in front of Arthur. He looked up, startled. Eleanor's eyes widened. My voice was low, but steady, cutting through the air immediately around us. Arthur, Eleanor. I came tonight with this. I gestured to the proposal. I wanted to offer the West Ridge Project partnership to Sterling Properties. Nearby conversations began to falter. A ripple of silence started to spread from our table. Julian's booming laugh from the head table cut off abruptly. Victoria's eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed on me. Father looked bewildered. But Julian made it very clear tonight, I continued, my voice gaining strength, carrying across the now silent room, that Sterling Properties has its sole leader. And that leadership doesn't align with my values or the kind of development this project deserves. I looked directly at the head table for a moment, my gaze unwavering. Then I turned back to Arthur and Eleanor, my voice warm and clear for everyone to hear. Arthur, Eleanor, you were the only ones at Sterling who ever truly saw my potential, who valued integrity, who believed in building something real. You are the partners I want. I want Sterling Creek Development to collaborate with Arthur and Eleanor Investments on the West Ridge Revitalization Project. The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur and Eleanor stared at the proposal, then at me, their faces a mixture of shock, understanding, and overwhelming pride. At the head table, Victoria's face was a mask of furious disbelief. Julian was gaping, looking utterly ridiculous, and Father just looked lost. Guests stared, whispers breaking the silence. The carefully constructed facade of unity and planned succession was completely shattered. I gave Arthur and Eleanor a genuine, heartfelt smile, a silent promise of a future built together. We'll talk details tomorrow. I didn't wait for their response, or the inevitable explosion from the head table. I turned and walked away towards the exit. The silence followed me, but this time it was a silence of shock, not indifference. Stares followed my back. I could feel Victoria's furious gaze, Julian's sputtering rage, Father's bewildered confusion. But none of it mattered. Stepping out into the cool night air, the noise of the gala fading behind me, I felt a wave of pure, exhilarating liberation wash over me. The heavy weight I had carried for years, the need for approval, the pain of neglect, the foolish hope was gone. I took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt utterly, completely free. The storm broke the next morning. My phone buzzed incessantly. Voicemails piled up, Victoria screaming, Julian threatening lawsuits and promising to ruin me, Father's voice strained and pleading, asking how I could do this to the family, completely bypassing the fact that they had done it first. Then came the professionals. An email from Sterling's legal counsel. A cold, official document filled with veiled threats, accusing me of using proprietary information acquired during my time at Sterling to secure the West Ridge project, implying they had a prior claim, demanding I cease and desist. It was designed to intimidate, to leverage their corporate power and resources against my small firm. The smear campaign began almost immediately. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was targeted. Calls were made to key investors I was courting for West Ridge, questioning my judgment, hinting at erratic behavior, suggesting my firm was unstable. My main contractors received anonymous calls raising concerns about my ability to pay. A small, but influential industry blog published a piece filled with anonymous quotes questioning my professional ethics and suggesting the West Ridge project was based on stolen concepts. It was a calculated, professional hit job orchestrated by Victoria, using Julian as the mouthpiece and their corporate machine as the weapon. I felt the fear then, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. This wasn't just hurt feelings. This was an attempt to destroy the life I had built from the ground up. My hard-won independence felt suddenly vulnerable. Then Grace called. Grace had been my father's longtime executive assistant at Sterling, a quiet force of efficiency and integrity. She'd seen it all unfold, Victoria's takeover, Julian's rise, my sidelining. She'd been forced out herself a year after I left. Riley, her voice was low, urgent. I heard. And I got something for you. She emailed me a scanned copy of an old project proposal draft I'd worked on years ago, with my name clearly on it, detailing the initial concept for a downtown revitalization project, the clear precursor to West Ridge. Julian had been in the meeting where I'd presented it and dismissed it as too ambitious. Grace had quietly saved the document. They can't say you stole the idea, Riley, she said. You had the idea first. They just weren't smart enough to see it. It was a small thing, but concrete proof, a shield against one of their main attacks. Grace was risking a lot to help me, a quiet act of solidarity from someone else who had been stepped on by Sterling's new regime. I met with Arthur and Eleanor. I showed them the legal threat, explained the smear tactics. They listened, their faces grim. This is what happens, Arthur said, his voice tight, when you threaten a fragile empire built on sand. He didn't sugarcoat the risk. Partnering with me now, under siege, put their firm at risk too. But there was no hesitation. We're with you, Riley, Eleanor said, reaching across the table to take my hand. They underestimated you then, and they're underestimating you now. We'll fight them. Arthur, drawing on his deep industry knowledge, outlined a strategy. Respond to the legal threats with firm, factual counter-arguments. Counter the smear campaign with transparency and undeniable results. And most importantly, push forward on West Ridge harder than ever. The fight was draining. A small but significant investor, a friend of Victoria's, pulled out, citing the uncertainty around the project. Losing that funding hurt, forcing me to scramble to cover the gap. I had tense meetings with other potential investors who cautiously brought up the rumors. I had to lay out the facts, present Grace's evidence, talk them through the legal threats, and project absolute confidence. It was exhausting, a constant battle to protect my reputation and my business. Julian's tactics became more desperate. He tried to poach my project manager, offering a ridiculous salary. My PM, loyal and disgusted by Sterling's behavior, refused, boosting my morale. Victoria orchestrated a small, fake community protest against West Ridge, citing dubious environmental concerns, quickly exposed by local news as having no real community backing. It was clumsy, but it showed their willingness to stoop low. I had a chance encounter with my father at a charity event. He looked gaunt, his eyes hollow. He pulled me aside briefly, glancing nervously over his shoulder at Victoria, who was deep in conversation nearby. Riley, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. This is difficult. For everyone. He didn't ask about West Ridge, didn't mention the lawsuits. Just be careful, he said, a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes, quickly masked by resignation. It wasn't the support I yearned for, but it was a glimpse of the man I once knew trapped. It was heartbreaking, a quiet confirmation of his powerlessness against Victoria. I just nodded, a lump in my throat. I am, Father, I said quietly, and walked away before Victoria noticed. Riley and her team, with Arthur's strategic guidance and Eleanor's unwavering belief, dug in. The smear campaign and legal threats became fuel. Every challenge on the West Ridge project became an opportunity to prove Sterling Properties wrong. One major hurdle arose, a complex negotiation with the city council over a historical preservation variance. Sterling Properties, known for bulldozing its way through red tape, would have thrown money and lawyers at it. Riley, drawing on her passion for community-focused development and her genuine respect for the city's heritage, approached it differently. She spent weeks researching, meeting with historical societies, finding creative solutions that preserved the character of the area while allowing for modern revitalization. It was painstaking work, but it paid off. She secured the variance, not through force, but through thoughtful negotiation and genuine collaboration. This win generated positive local press, highlighting Riley's integrity and innovative approach, a direct contrast to Sterling's heavy-handed reputation. The West Ridge project began to take shape. The skeletons of buildings rose, clad in materials that reflected the neighborhood's character. It wasn't just profitable, it was beautiful, blending old and new seamlessly. Photos of the project, shared online and in local publications, became a visual counter-argument to the negative rumors. At the annual Industry Awards Gala, an event Victoria and Julian always dominated, Riley was nominated for Developer of the Year for the West Ridge project. Walking into the room, the atmosphere was different from the Sterling Anniversary Gala. There were still glances, but many were curious, even admiring. Victoria and Julian were there, seated prominently, their faces a picture of strained politeness when they saw Riley. When Riley Sterling was announced as the winner, a genuine, enthusiastic applause filled the room. As I walked to the stage, I saw Victoria's tightly fixed smile and Julian's thunderous expression. On stage, I didn't mention the drama. I spoke about my passion for creating spaces that honored the past and served the future, thanking my team, my partners Arthur and Eleanor, and the community of West Ridge. It was a public, irrefutable validation of my work and my integrity. Arthur and Eleanor beamed, sharing in my triumph. Our partnership on West Ridge wasn't just financially successful for them, it validated their decision to invest in talent and integrity over old money connections. Our relationship deepened into something truly familial. Dinners at their cozy, art-filled home felt more like coming home than any visit to my father's sprawling, sterile mansion ever had. We talked about business, yes, but also about life, art, and everything in between. They were the family I chose, and they had chosen me back. Inspired by Arthur's early mentorship and Grace's courage, I used some of the West Ridge profits to establish the Phoenix Initiative, a program to mentor and provide seed funding for aspiring young developers from underrepresented backgrounds. Grace came on board to help run it, her sharp eye for talent invaluable. It was a way to create the opportunities one wished I'd had, to show others that integrity and hard work could build success, even without traditional connections. Signs of Sterling Properties' struggles under Julian's leadership were becoming more apparent. Failed bids on major projects, key employees leaving, some quietly reaching out to me for jobs, rumors of financial strain. Julian's initial arrogance at industry events was replaced by a defensive swagger. Victoria still projected control, but I could see the lines of stress around her eyes. They had claimed the empire, but they didn't know how to rule it. I transformed my own apartment, took down the last few photos that felt more like obligations than memories, decorated with art and furniture that reflected my own taste, my own journey. My space became a sanctuary, a physical representation of my independence and self-acceptance. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was finally inhabiting my own life fully. Months passed. West Ridge was nearing completion, a beacon of successful, ethical development. Sterling Properties continued its slow, visible decline. The legal threats from months ago had quietly faded away. They had no case, especially with Grace's evidence. The smear campaign had been countered by undeniable results and a sterling, no pun intended, reputation. Then they showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon. My assistant buzzed my office. "Riley, your father and stepmother are here." And Julian. My stomach didn't clench with fear or dread this time. It settled into a hard, quiet resolve. They walked into my office, looking slightly out of place amidst the architectural models and vibrant project boards, a space that was undeniably mine. Victoria was still impeccably dressed, but her posture was strained. Julian looked sullen and defeated. Father looked older, his shoulders slumped. They didn't waste much time with pleasantries. Victoria got straight to it, a forced smile stretched across her face. "Riley, dear, we need to talk. Sterling is facing some temporary challenges. With your success on West Ridge, we thought perhaps you could offer some guidance. Or perhaps we could finally discuss that partnership." Julian chimed in, devoid of his usual swagger. "Yeah, Riley, look, about the gala, things were said. We were under pressure. Families should stick together, right? We could really use your help." Father finally spoke, his voice weak. "Riley, please. For the family. We need to put this unpleasantness behind us." I listened patiently, leaning back in my chair. I saw their desperation, their entitlement. They hadn't come to apologize or reconcile. They had come because they needed something from me, something they thought they could still take. I understand Sterling is having difficulties, I said calmly, my voice steady and professional. And I understand you need help. I looked at each of them. But you had your chance. At the gala, Julian made it clear there was a sole leader for Sterling's future. You erased my contributions, dismissed my potential, and when I dared to build my own success, you tried to destroy me with lawsuits and lies. My voice remained level, stating facts, not expressing anger. You wanted everything for yourselves. You claimed it. I gestured around my office, to the project boards. I built this. I secured West Ridge. I navigated the challenges. With the help of people who believed in me, people like Arthur and Eleanor and Grace, who risked her own safety to help me prove the truth. I looked at Julian. This empire isn't built on taking credit for others' work or relying on manipulation, Julian. It's built on integrity and hard work. Everything you dismissed. I turned back to Victoria and Father. You made your choice. You showed me exactly where I stood. You taught me that the only person I could rely on was myself, and that the only validation that mattered was my own. My gaze settled on Father, a quiet sadness replacing the resolve for a moment. You let it happen, Father. This project, I finished picking up a smaller model of the West Ridge development. This company, this success, it's not for negotiation. It's not Sterling's. It's mine. And I will not be sharing it, or my time, or my energy, with people who tried to ruin me. I placed the model back down firmly. I wish you peace. But I am done pretending there is a place for me in your world. Please do not contact me again. Victoria's face hardened into cold fury. Julian mumbled something resentful. Father just looked away, unable to meet my eyes. They stood for a moment, the reality of my absolute refusal sinking in. Then, defeated, they turned and walked out of my office, out of my life. As the door closed, I felt the last remnants of the old pain dissolve. It wasn't victory, not in a vengeful sense. It was peace. I looked out the window at the city skyline, spotting the cranes working on West Ridge. My project. My success. My future. The empire they claimed might be crumbling, but mine was just beginning. And it was built on a foundation of truth, resilience, and the unwavering support of the family I chose. I sat down at my desk, picked up a blueprint for a new project, a challenging, exciting one. My voice, my vision, my future. No translation, no apology, no compromise needed. I was home.